players, an Arceus for each one, a Flying Pikachu for each one, actually 2 Arceus for James Thiel. Could be a little awkward, but he does play the full 4 copies. Marnie, Flying Pikachu, really nothing too bad for any of these players. That one Hyper Potion for Hale up at the top of the prizes, I guess, could be a little annoying.
Overall, this is probably the best we could hope for, especially with 2 decks that have so much utility to them, and Starbirth goes a long way at fixing any awkward prizes, any awkward starting hands. So overall, we're set up for a good, clean game, Chip, and we're underway.
Let's go. Finals time here in Salt Lake City. Hale Obernolte going first, starting that Hisuian Goodra V up against James's Espeon V.
I wonder how much card reading we're actually going to see here, Chip. The players have reached deep within the reaches of the card pool in the metagame to find some really hilarious ideas, and you got to learn your opponent's deck on the fly as you play against it. Opening up with the Ultra Ball, discarding that Colress's Experiment. No Lost Box stuff in Hale's list, of course. Just loves this supporter for the ability to see 5 cards from the top.
Yeah, seeing 5 cards is so strong in a deck like this, and it also allows you to thin bad cards out of your deck that you no longer want to see, things that are no longer relevant to your setup once you're kind of more established, just putting them in the Lost Zone so you don't have to deal with them. Hale must be sitting on a pretty nice hand if he's willing to discard 2 supporters to this opening Ultra Ball.
Yeah, the Ultra Ball, just looking through the prizes right now, sees that there's not too many detrimental things in the prizes, but obviously just pulls the Arceus V. We need the Arceus V and the Trinity Charge, Trinity Nova to get the Goodra set up.
Yes.
And as we saw in the Reggie matchup, right, the Arceus having to kind of be vulnerable a bit in the active for a couple turns is the window of opportunity that your opponent has to deal the most damage, to get the most valid setup, perhaps an early couple prizes, but just 2 Pokemon set down. Back over to James, taking things very light, very chill here in the opening stages.
Yeah, James had a bunch of extra cards to work with off of some mulligans, but really was not very well aided by it. He's holding on to a Lumineon V in the hand, but other than that, it's a bunch of tech cards. The Drapion V, the one Volo that he plays in the list in order to discard a Pokemon from your bench. A nice little way to maybe get a surprise healing factor involved. But it's going to have to be Lumineon just for the professor's research. Definitely not the best start whenever you are getting extra cards to work with off of your opponent's mulligan.
We'll see if that Volo comes in, you know, in a late game scenario where Lumineon V or Crobat is kind of hanging out on the bench as a liability to give up 2 prizes. We've seen so many end game ship come down to factors like that, but indeed finds the professor's research off of Lumineon's Luminous Sign ability, and this is certainly a very slow start for James.
James does have a Path to the Peak in his hand. I wonder if we'll see him put that in play, try to slow Hale down, cut him off of using something like a Starbirth on the next turn. Something to always consider, though, is you're also shutting off your own abilities and your own option to use Starbirth on your next turn.
Yeah, just has the Psychic Energy as well to attach to the Espeon V, has that Zen shot to just deal 60 damage to a Pokemon V.
Honestly, pretty solid little attack for an evolving basic, just 1 single energy, and start to throw down some damage on turn 1.
A lot of cards being discarded here. You can really see how much of a brick James has had on this opening turn, but you've got to find your setup. You've got to find your cards. It doesn't matter how many you have to throw away to do so.
Does find a Quick Ball, so this could grab an Arceus V. There are a couple Arceus VStar in the hand. Also, that Espeon Vmax was drawn off the research. Pretty nice, so you could start to get ready to go with that attack on your next turn, potentially, if Hale does go with the Trinity Charge, potentially.
It's just going to be a matter of trying to get your attackers set up, right? If the Goodra V-Star gets going with the Rolling Iron and that damage reduction, the Crystal Cave, all of that healing, it's just so hard to even take any prizes. This early game is the ripest opportunity that James has to get a prize lead, and that you buy yourself such a huge buffer to actually have a means to pick and choose what Pokemon you want to hunt down to close out the game.
Zen Shot throwing down 60 damage onto the Hisuian Goodra V. Looks like Hale did top deck that double turbo energy for turn. We'll see what else he has available. Evolution Incense can get the Arceus V-Star, but with Path to the Peak in play, Hale will be cut off of that Starbirth.
Yeah, so the V-Star Starbirth off the table. Not even trying to pivot into the Goodra V-Star. We don't want to get this evolution really set up until we have the energy attached. We'll see if Hale has a way to get around this path for now. As it stands right now, looks like a Marnie's also just being employed. Looking through more of the deck, James was in a pretty bad spot, had to use that Professor's Research, and now after all those cards were gained, they're going right back into the bottom of the deck. 4 cards, yes, James, do not make any mistakes at this juncture.
Yep, we've seen a couple of extra cards drawn by accident from players on the stream so far this weekend, and those double prize penalties really make a huge difference in this game. So James quickly catching that a 5th card accidentally got added, never looked at it, gets put back on top. Now the quick ball coming out from Hale can start to establish another Hisuian Goodra V. Maybe even the Radiant Gardevoir could get worked in at some point, but Goodra is going to be the priority for now.
I like discarding the boss's orders as well. This lets us know Hale just wants to get a big, bulky Pokemon in the active spot and just keep swinging on whatever happens to be in the active. You don't need to do really any finessing around what Pokemon do I want to get KOs on, especially in a matchup like this. It's not a single prize sort of matchup. Anything that you take down is going to give you 2 prizes.
And it was just the pass over to James, who is also sitting on a pretty awkward hand. I think he has a lot of searching cards, but now his own path to the peak is cutting him off of his own Starbirth.
The awkwardness from both players is actually horrifying here, Chip. Hale has a better opportunity to actually start raining some damage down, I think, just through manual attachments, because James just has the Espeon V in the active, the Arceus not really doing a lot. All of these Pikachus as well just getting discarded to pay for the quick balls, not really going to be relevant for this matchup apparently.
I think that James' best option here is to use Quick Ball, grab down Bidoof, and then go for another Zen shot. He's holding on to Ultra Ball and Evolution Incense. Actually will play the Evolution Incense now to find that Arceus VStar. He cannot use the Starbirth, but has Ultra Ball for the next turn, so he can Ultra Ball away the card in hand plus the top deck to go for Bibarel to try to juice that hand back up with the Industrious Incisors.
Okay, that seems like a good line, Chip, and I like the Zen shot, right? Even though both players have a really slow start right now, the 60 damage is going to keep adding up. And ironically, a lot of the time in this metagame, we have a lot of decks that are based around just consistently dealing a lot of damage over and over again. And, you know, James does play that copy of Pumpkaboo. Maybe as we come back around to his turn, we get the Pumpkaboo to knock the peak, get your Starbirth in, and then reestablish that peak. Hale also throwing down the Corals Experiment. Finally, 5 cards off the top. Going to get a lot of utility here, hopefully.
Yeah, it is interesting and worth noting that James could have gone for that Pumpkaboo play on the last turn. He did quick ball out that Bidoof, but chose not to for whatever reason. Instead wants to play it a little slower. Feels okay about where he is sitting at.
Yeah, I think that because Hale has demonstrated a similarly awkward and slow start, James is going to take that extra turn to get the Industrious Incisors online. When your opponent gets fully established, you're going to need as many resources as possible to find the tools you need to get these knockouts. Ultra Ball now coming through, getting rid of the Drapions. James has done a really great job of finding the cards that aren't going to be needed in this matchup and using them as discards here to pay for the rest of these ball effects.
And here comes Bibarel, ready to aid James in this spot. Industrious Incisors, that excellent ability, drawing you up to 5 cards in your hand. And in this spot, James having a 0-card hand, this will get him the full 5 from the top of the deck.
Beautiful sequencing here, Chip. The Espeon V also just ticking away with that 60 damage over and over again. Hale has showed us, however, that he doesn't mind giving up 2 or even 3 prizes early in the game, because once that Goodra VStar is stacked up with energy and just chilling in the active, you know, the final prizes are going to be off the table for your opponent.
Bibarel unable to find James a helpful supporter card. There is the Raihan, but of course that is only live and playable once your opponent has taken a KO on the previous turn. There is the Pumpkaboo in the hand, which could be why we're seeing the Crobat eyed up off of this quick ball.
Yeah, the Arceus being discarded to the quick ball is a little bit rough, because we know there are 2 Arceus V in the prize cards for James, but I guess as long as you get the Starbirth down before it happens to get bossed up and knocked out, it's probably just enough value for James. Hale also, without the Trinity Nova, hasn't gotten any energy stacked up. The Espeon Vmax, not really going to be a threat at all.
Yeah, still a little ways away from that being something that Hale has to consider playing around potentially, but this Crobat can find 4 cards. At minimum, James would love to get an energy attachment this turn, still something that he is lacking, and it looks like he'll have to use his V-Star power in order to do it.
Yeah, the Pokemon are here, but they just can't really swing in. There's finally some energy on the Arceus at the very least, but who knows if Zen's shot is just going to be the third attack in a row we see from James.
Marnie could be the play. Seems pretty solid after your opponent just used Colress's experiment to add 3 cards into their hand. So go ahead and put that down on the bottom of the deck for Hale. Make it really difficult for him to get back into whatever combo pieces he's trying to set up. And of course, get yourself 5 more cards so you can make a decision on what you want to go after with your Starbirth potentially.
So here we go. Bibarel's already been used. Crobat's already been used. We know the Volo's in the deck, and this is the Crobat and Luminion are the type of cards that we do want to discard.
James could go in with the Espeon here. It doesn't count energy on your opponent's active Pokemon. It just counts all of your opponent's Pokemon. So Max Mindstorm is doing enough damage at this time to knock out the active Goodra.
Wow, yeah. The Max Mindstorm with the double turbo, also powering up that ability a little bit. It's going to be reduced a little bit from James's double turbo. So again, the math still checks out thanks to the double Zen shot.
That's right. Yeah, that damage ends up adding up. Hale wants to make sure he knows exactly what that Espeon does, and sure enough, it can lay down a lot of damage in spots like this.
And after the shuffle here, looks like that is going to be the play, Chip. Getting a couple early prizes is fantastic to, again, build up that lead. Hale doesn't have a great way to respond to the Espeon Vmax, still very strong at 310 HP.
And look at these 2 cards grabbed by James off of the Starbirth. Path to the Peak and Boss's Orders for the next turn. He wants to be aggressive after the Goodra VStar on the bench on the following turn if Hale puts a bunch of energies in play.
Yeah, converting this position is so strong. You don't want to get just 2 prizes just because you can, not really have another plan to keep that momentum going. James already thinking about these next plays, keeping this tempo up. Hale right now being denied the Starbirth is so important. 4 cards in hand from the Marnie, 1 off the top of the deck, finds an Ultra Ball.
Does ditch a couple of water energy. We know Hale has a pretty heavy count of Melanie in this list, so he can recover those a little later on and potentially even this turn if he wants to get some energy acceleration. What makes things really awkward, though, here for Hale is that if he swings in with this Trinity Nova on the Arceus V-Star and puts even just 2 energies on the Hisuian Goodra in play, that will allow James to deal 280 damage on the next turn. That's why we're seeing the Radiant Gardevoir come down. If Hale can find a replacement stadium to bump that path to the peak, the Radiant Gardevoir could protect the Goodra from a potential KO.
Yeah, the Loving Veil ability reducing the damage by 20 only from Pokemon V. So it actually does matter for this matchup here in the finals, and the math is going to get really tricky. We haven't seen this sort of energy pressure in the metagame for a long time.
And this is super smart from Hale. He's not going to take the risk, not going to load any extra energies in play, especially because that path to the peak is already established. He wasn't able to find a replacement stadium. Maybe he would have gotten an energy down if he had drawn into one of his crystal caves potentially, but because that path to the peak is turning off the Loving Veil ability of the Radiant Gardevoir, if there was 5 energies in play, James would have been able to boss his orders for a KO.
Yeah, and now this Espeon Vmax in the active has a pretty nice amount of damage on it. This is going to give up 3 prizes if it goes down. It's going to put Hale in the lead. So things are a little bit dicey here for James. Hale having the luxury of not accelerating energy to play around this Vmax Pokemon is absolutely enormous here, Chip.
Espeon hitting for 220 damage right now. Of course, that damage output being reduced by 20 thanks to the double turbo energy. There is a lightning in the hand, so we might see this Arceus V-Star start to get established. You need to find something else to start attacking with, and that's really the best option on James's bench. You don't want to go with Pumpkaboo or Bibarel. Arceus is the way.
Yeah, who knows? And now with this Vmax in play, maybe the Volo comes through to just discard this, deny those prizes. But then you're losing out, I think, on your main attacker for this game. Bibarel drawing a couple more cards now.
Here's an interesting play from James, using the boss's orders to bring up that Hisuian Goodra and just wants to hit it. Doing 220 damage, not enough to get the KO, but just laying down some good, solid damage while he can before that rolling iron attack starts reducing the damage output.
Yeah, getting the damage down ahead of time is so important in this matchup, Chip, and something that a lot of decks really struggle to do consistently, but finding it here in game number 1 is going to be massive.
Now,
both two heavily damaged Pokemon in play on both sides.
Yes, and now Hale has not used his V-Star power yet this game. There has not been a Star Birth, so Crystal Cave can come out, and we could potentially see the Moisture Star come through to fully heal the damage off of this active Hisuian Goodra V-Star.
Even when your opponent finds that window of opportunity to sneak in the damage underneath Rolling Iron, we can still go for Crystal Cave, and Moisture Star really just seals up that initial weakness. Once you've caught up on your tempo, should be good to go.
Hale's really thinking here. He must have kind of a tough decision to make. He, of course, also is playing the heavy count of those Hyper Potions, so with some double turbo energies, could potentially get some healing through that.
Yeah, there's only one water energy on the Goodra. In order to use Rolling Iron, we do need a metal energy.
Yeah, a Melanie or something like that would have to come through, and then finding the metal off of the draw.
Because you don't want to use, right, you don't want to accelerate a ton of energy until this Espeon Vmax is out of the picture.
Yeah. Yeah, if you were able to accelerate this turn and attach, you'd be knocking out the Espeon. So that would honestly be the perfect turn to start getting a bunch of energies in play.
So hopefully it all comes together for Hale. Going to go for Star Birth instead of the Moisture Star, finding perhaps a metal energy here and another card as well to shore up this turn. Melanie to accelerate that water energy, as you said, Chip.
Yeah, and the metal energy can be guaranteed as well off of the Starbirth. I imagine those are likely the two cards that Hale is going with if he is going for this strategy. Maybe he could work in a Hyper Potion play, but yeah, it's going to be, yeah, you can't really do the Hyper Potion play if you need to get all of your energies in play to attack this turn. So this is going to be really awkward. Hale, I guess maybe if he could get a switch, that would work as well.
Oh, beautiful. That way we can attack with a Pokemon that's not going to be as vulnerable. Has the Hyper Potion now, discarding 2 energies off the Goodra V-Star. Going to heal up that 120 damage and put the big charm on it. The tanky boy is already set up, and Arceus prepared to take knockout on this Espeon Vmax.
Really good play here from Hale, healing that Goodra, putting down the big charm, making it as difficult as possible for James to knock out. The Quick Ball can thin that big Parasol out of the deck as well. And with the switch into the Arceus V-Star, this active Espeon Vmax will go down. And at the same time, Hale will have the opportunity off of Trinity Nova to throw 3 energies onto this Goodra.
Hale has navigated this early game perfectly. Also now has the Crystal Cave to keep the healing train going. And Radiant Gardevoir is now online.
Yes, that is absolutely a factor that James is going to need to consider when calculating his damage output. He does have more Path to the Peak, so something that we could see come through. 3 prizes now for Hale, halfway through the game, but it is a long way from over. He's going to need to find a way to knock out a 2-prize Pokemon and then clean up the game on like the Pumpkaboo or Bibarel potentially.
Every time we see Hale kind of backed into a tight spot, you know, Arceus goes down, and then Goodra V-Star shows up in the active spot as the final boss. So much HP, way more HP than a lot of decks are prepared to deal with, and it just walls the opponent down, and they can't take those final prizes regardless.
James is playing his own copy of the Radiant Gardevoir, just grabbing it off of Quick Ball. I think that there is either a Marnie or a Research in hand, so having that is something to just either throw away into the discard pile or put on the bottom of the deck. You don't want to draw into it. We've seen players doing this excellent thinning strategy throughout the course of the weekend.
And we can see the deck is getting pretty thin as well. If Hale draws us down to a stalemate, there is a chance that James will just, of course, run out of cards in the deck. We've kind of moved beyond the metagame with the Silene and the Palpads, kind of putting resources back into the deck. The players are trying to look for their important cards as quickly as possible, put them down at full force to close out the game.
Let's see if James can find the double turbo, but no, he is unable to find that piece off of this Marnie. Does have the Ultra Ball in hand. This can thin a couple of cards out, try to get down to a low hand size to use Industrious Incisors. James really needs to get an attack off this turn. There is a decent amount of energy in the discard pile, so he's debating that, whether or not he can get rid of this Lightning. Looks like it feels safe to get rid of for now. There are 2 double turbo in the deck, and that is really what James needs here. Going down to just 2 cards in hand, it's going to be 3 cards drawn off the Industrious Incisors. Can he find the double turbo? That's the big question.
Yeah, we need to find the double turbo, get that 180 damage onto Hale's Arceus V-Star, set that up for a KO. 2 prizes that we can take down and continue this game. Finding the final prizes is going to be
4 cards now off the Incisors after
Here
the
we go.
switch.
4 cards. Let's see the double turbo. Let's go.
2 in the deck, needs a chance to find one, and
There
sure
we
enough,
go.
he does hit, so he will be able to launch and attack this turn. Now, throwing the damage, the energy, excuse me, down onto the flying Pikachu is really going to be James' best option. There is a decent amount of energy already in the discard pile, so hopefully there's enough to still accelerate something.
Yeah, and the thing you got to remember as well, Chip, is that a lot of the Pikachu Vs and the Flying Pikachu Vmaxes were discarded much earlier in the game in order to pay for those ball cards. I think James might have been hoping that the Espeon would do a little bit more work before going down.
Oh no, I don't see any energy cards in James' deck. He only plays 3 basic lightning, and 1 is on the Arceus, and I guess 2 are in the discard pile. 1 psychic, I believe, was in the hand, so I think James might have to ride on the back of this Arceus VStar for the rest of this game.
All the energy gone. James did such a spectacular job of thinning through the deck, finding all the cards, but they didn't get enough value while they were in play. Now that we're back over to Hale, he's got a damaged Arceus VStar in the active, but can very easily retreat this, just stall and buy time looking for a Hyper Potion. And Crystal Cave is going to be healing up this Goodra meanwhile.
This is really looking like a favorable position for Hale. Every single turn that goes by that the stadium doesn't get bumped, more and more damage can be healed off of this Goodra. Of course, there has only been 1 Hyper Potion played up to this point in the game, so still plenty of opportunity to get some healing. And speaking of which, Hyper Potion removing 120 damage. Now this Arceus VStar with 240 hit points,
Oof.
and that is a number that James is not going to be able to hit. Even with Path to the Peak and the powerful colorless energy and a choice belt, that would be 230 damage, 10 short of finding a KO this turn.
Yeah, having the Radiant Gardevoir already punishes the low damage output of these V-Star decks. Arceus V-Star is just kind of here to set up a little bit of damage, accelerate energy onto a backup attacker. And we saw the reverse this game, Chip. You know, the Espeon came into the active and did a lot of early attacking, and then Arceus now trying to be the second string attacker just isn't strong enough to get through this damage reduction and healing.
Marnie and Prey is a strategy that has aided many Pokemon players. I don't know if it's enough for James in this spot, though. That is what he has to do, his only chance. Play this Marnie, hope that it slows Hale down enough, and just keep launching damage out. But this Arceus V-Star, while it can accelerate a Psychic to the Flying Pikachu, that's not going to help it get to attacking. Once this Arceus goes down, there's just no attacker remaining for James. I think he's run completely out of gas.
Yeah, and you can see that pile of cards in the hand was the deck. He was running out of cards, absolutely. Going to scoop here in game number 1. Hale takes it as 1 win away from sealing the deal and becoming the winner of the Salt Lake City Regional Championships. Professor's research, okay, Arceus V, the Espeon Vmax in the prizes is big. James isn't going to be able to rely on establishing this right away. Has to take 1 knockout beforehand.
That is definitely an annoying prize to see. James does have Arceus and an energy, but that is all for this first turn. Just a pass onto Hale's end of things. Starting the Arceus V for both players. Now the Quick Ball discards a water energy, activating potential Melanie in the future. If Hale is holding on to the double turbo energy, we could indeed see the Trinity charge this turn. Hisui and Goodra quick to hit the bench here off this Quick Ball.
Yeah, once we get the Hisui and Goodra set up, if we get the Trinity charge, we can accelerate energy into it. Hale was a little bit wary and is now very much aware of the Espeon Vmax. Might be afraid of accelerating the energy, but again, Hale is also playing an Arceus deck and can still take advantage of a similar weakness in the early stages of the game to play for tempo.
Right away, the Melanie being the supporter of choice for the turn, as long as there is at least 1 basic energy, which there is Trinity Charge. We'll see how mindful he wants to be of that Espeon. Like you mentioned, it is something that he needs to be thinking about at least.
And with the energy attachment, Path to the Peak,
huge.
Yeah, just going for the acceleration I think is massive. If we don't even see an Espeon V in play already, there's a chance to get so far ahead that you then enjoy the luxury of being able to boss it up and just knock it out before it is able to evolve.
Yeah, the Path is an absolutely massive hit from Hale, putting that card into play, trying to slow the opponent down. He only plays 1 copy of Path to the Peak in this deck. It's the perfect time to draw it, though, as James is going to be cut off from that Starbirth V-Star power unless he can find one of his 2 answers through the collapsed stadium that he plays or the Pumpkaboo.
Players enjoyed using Starbirth for so long, ever since Arceus was added to the game, but now players are showing a little bit more, maturity, a little bit more discipline about using this effect, recognizing that, well, I've got my setup set already, and denying that powerful ability to my opponent is much more important to keep them behind.
James unable to find the Arceus VStar. He does have the double turbo energy, but without an Arceus VStar to get extra damage in play and get a little bit of extra energy in play as well on his side of the field, that is going to be a little awkward, and I don't see a supporter either. He does find the Pumpkaboo, but with no Arceus V-Star, it's not going to be helpful to get that path out of play and start using your Starbirth V-Star power.
Has the double turbo energy, might just be using a, no, does use the Trinity Charge. I was wondering if he's going to go for Power Edge or something. But after that, just accelerate some energy, is going to try to get this Espeon. After looking through the deck, is going to recognize as well the Espeon Vmax is in the prizes.
Yeah, we'll see if he checks those prizes closely or not. Sometimes after players lose a game one, they don't worry as much about taking the necessary time to check every little prize.
Especially in a matchup like this that's threatening to go long, you might just be trying to go very, very quickly through your second game to make sure you have plenty of time to finish out your third.
I like this decision from James. Get a Arceus V with a couple energies on it, so you can start to go in with a Trinity Nova next turn if you're able to find an Arceus V-Star. He does also have that one copy of Powerful Colorless Energy in the hand, so that could be a really good setup if he can find a V-Star next turn. Get that Powerful Colorless Energy down, he'd be dealing 220 damage with Trinity Nova, which knocks out all of Hale's Pokemon V.
And that is the strategy James wants to go for. This isn't a matchup where you can find the right attacker a lot of the time, right? These Arceus decks that have multiple Pokemon to pivot to and accelerate energy onto want to find the thing that's hitting for weakness, that has the beneficial effect. In this matchup, it's just all about the damage chip. Meanwhile, over to Hale, just playing the Ultra Ball, looking through the deck. And what are we looking for from this position? The Arceus V-Star, perhaps?
He grabbed that Goodra.
The Goodra V-Star,
he evolved it right away as well, so he knows this is where he wants to be. Retreat this Arceus, get it out of here. If he doesn't have to set up by using his Arceus V-Star power, that means he's leaving a path open for a Moisture Star somewhere down the line.
And this is a situation that James didn't really need to deal with in game number one. Had, that early knockout on an Arceus V, and now with Goodra being set up so quickly ahead of the Espeon, is now ready, willing, and able to just start tanking through everything that James can put out here.
James does find the Lumineon from the top of the deck, so Pumpkaboo's Pumpkin Pit can remove the path to the peak, now allowing Luminous Sign to be utilized. Grabbing any supporter card from the deck, may just see the Professor's Research here, try to dump the hand and draw into a new one. Potentially Marnie could be the choice though.
And James also again seeing that the Espeon Vmax is off the table, thinking about pivoting here.
Could be something he's considering. Actually, James only playing one copy of Professor's Research, and it's in the prize cards.
The Professor's Research also off the table, so James is going to maybe thinking about going for a Marnie.
I think that's his only option.
You're thinking about one play, Chip, looking through the deck, and then it's cut off. You go for the backup play, you're looking through the deck, and that's also in the prizes. Now we're going for the third string play here for James.
Marnie will have to be the grab. Of course, that Powerful Colorless Energy in the hand could come down onto the bench, though it's not going to be as useful hitting into the Goodra, 270 hit points, and then reduced 80 as well, thanks to that effect of the Rolling Iron.
And so once the Marnie resolves, Hale's also going to lose the cards that are in hand. But I think that the setup is kind of already complete. Everything's established with Path to the Peak getting bumped. Hale is free to just establish the Crystal Cave, has a few extra shots of drawing into Hyper Potion. But here it goes, James attaching the Powerful Colorless Energy to that Arceus V on the bench.
And the Marnie coming out, James getting 5, Hale only getting 4 cards. James does find the Ultra Ball, so we can finally see the Arceus V-Star come out.
And the bench is full up once more, Chip. No way to make room for Bidoof, get the barrel set up. Maybe Volo comes through at a future turn, but when you're this far behind, you can't take that turn off of just playing a utility supporter. You need something with a bit of a stronger effect.
Yeah, James is going to want to be playing Marnie most turns through the rest of the game. I feel like maybe a Boss's Orders or a Raihan somewhere in there.
Ultra Ball does find the Arceus VStar, and the Starbirth ability goes off, so James going to find the final two pieces of what the strategy is here. With Espeon Vmax kind of out of the picture for now, what are the two cards you probably want from this position? Finding a belt, perhaps? Or
yeah, Path to the Peak, the first grab makes a lot of sense. Try to make it as difficult as possible for Hale to pull off the Moisture Star, get some healing. This is really going to be James' best strategy. Just hit as hard as you can and hope that your opponent doesn't have the response.
The threat level from Hale is pretty high, but he has yet to take any prizes, so slowing down the ability to take additional prizes after this wounded Arceus V goes down is going to be super important for James.
So Trinity Nova will hit for 140 damage this coming turn. Of course, 220 because of the boosted powerful colorless energy, and then minus 80, 140 damage getting laid down on that Arceus Goodra. So with a combination of Hyper Potion and Crystal Cave, Hale wouldn't even have to necessarily use that Moisture Star V-Star power, could save it for later on.
Yeah, I didn't actually get eyes on what 4 cards Hale got off of the Marnie, but Path to the Peak does indeed come through. There's the damage. Going to be a lot of agreements on the calculations here.
Yeah, so much math that has to be applied here. Should be, I think, 140, but looks like 160 putting down. You know, maybe it's me who's doing the math wrong.
Yeah, because let me see. There's no Radiant Gardevoir.
Yeah, they're fixing it.
There's
Listen, my math was right.
Yeah,
we
Chip had it all along.
So down to the correct amount of damage. And if Hale is just hanging on to a Hyper Potion, this could all go away almost instantly, especially in combination with double turbo energy.
It's so mysterious. I'm actually shaking, Chip. What are those 4 cards? What's this 5th card off the top of the deck as we head over to Hale's turn?
Could also maybe get some options through a Melanie to accelerate energies, potentially Colress as well. Quick Ball's going to start it off, though, thinning a card out of the deck.
Okay, so that maybe signals a Melanie, right? You want to draw that, just thin that card out before you play the Melanie to just draw 3 off the top.
It could be the Colress as well, just get a Pokemon out of the deck that you don't really want, and also maybe wanting to establish the second Hisuian Goodra V-Star at some point, so seems like a good grab here.
Yeah, having the Goodra V, just another thing you can accelerate energy into. The Arceus Vs are just chilling on the bench. We don't have any V-Star in play. But James needs to get around this Goodra somehow, and indeed it was the Colress, Chip. 5 cards seen, 3 cards kept.
Hale would love to find, at minimum, that Stadium card, the Crystal Cave, so that he could bump Path and probably use Moisture Star, unless that combo also included a double turbo energy and the Hyper Potion. That's really what he's looking for, just some way to heal this Goodra.
I don't think we've seen any Goodra decks whiff on the healing so far, but it is certainly a possibility. It'd be a massive window of opportunity for James.
It does feel like they always have it, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You find the Arceus V-Star, Path to the Peak, cutting off that Starbirth, mind you. We have to find that Crystal Cave if we want access to that ability, and Hale has to make the choice now with the Crystal Cave entering play to go for Moisture Star or Starbirth.
Could go for the Starbirth if he's got one of the 2 pieces in his hand potentially for the Hyper Potion play, or maybe he could math it out and figure, hey, if I just go in with Rolling Iron, I don't think my opponent can quite take the KO.
Yeah, just has to calculate around this powerful colorless energy, and that's about it. There is a little bit of protection on James's side.
Moisture Star is the choice here for Hale. Go ahead and remove that damage, flip the V-Star marker, and start swinging once again with Rolling Iron.
Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of damage reduction from the Radiant Gardevoir on James's side.
Yep, so 180 damage being played onto that Arceus. James here without access to... Oh, this is a big swing here, though. Finding the boss's orders can bring up this Goodra and hit into it, take the KO. It is 220.
Because of the powerless.
Exactly, powerful colorless. That is a big time hit. This will be 2 prizes to James, and he should take the Espeon Vmax off the prizes here, which is probably his next best attacker.
The 50-50. Is he a bottom left gamer or a bottom right prize card gamer to get the Espeon Vmax?
If he's taken 2, right, he should take both off the bottom unless he randomly takes from the middle or something like that.
Okay, good, good, good. 2
Here
prizes.
we go. Yes,
I'm
grab.
so used to the single prizes.
Yes,
you know,
we've seen so much Reggie this weekend,
the
right?
Goodra V, you know, unevolved, great way to snipe that down, get those easy 2 prizes. Things are still looking a bit shaky for James because the main attackers do have a lot of damage on them, but having the Espeon Max to threaten, especially now that Hale has had a bit more time to establish, maybe didn't think the Vmax was that big of a threat. There's a pretty significant amount of energy still in play.
Colress's experiment seeing the top 5 does have to send 2 to the Lost Zone. Losing a Crystal Cave could be a little relevant, something that Hale is probably not happy to see go down, but those other 3 cards must have been a little bit more valuable. Rolling Iron will take this KO. The damage reduction still, of course, in play.
Yeah, even with the damage reduction from Gardevoir, we've got enough to, of course, take down the Arceus VStar. So now 80 less damage from attacks. Espeon V being promoted. We've got the Vmax in hand. 4 energies on the side of Hale. It's going to be 60 damage per with that max ability.
And no reduction this game because there is no double turbo energy on the Espeon VMAX now. So going to be hitting for 240 damage. Of course, that damage reduction coming in will reduce it down to 160, enough to set up for a 2-hit knockout. And that's what James is hoping he can cut Hale off from by playing this Marnie, limiting him to just 4 cards, especially after Colress was just played.
Yeah, the Espeon VMAX, uninjured, 310 HP, a little bit of extra protection from the Radiant Gardevoir on James's side.
Yes.
Is going to be very resilient to stay in the active for a couple turns and hopefully set up this attack. There's not another Goodra in play now for Hale to pivot to.
Here's a Capture Energy coming down onto the Lumineon, maybe just hoping to utilize that as a pivot later on in the game, a free retreat option potentially. Flying Pikachu being brought to the front of the deck. Are we going to maybe see Max Balloon come out at some point this game?
Just trying to find enough attackers to keep up the damage and threat potential here, Chip. Also eyeballing the Bidoof. Can I get away with a utility Pokemon on my bench rather than an attacker?
There's also the Bidoof in hand, so something else to think about. I think we're potentially seeing Hale, James just failing the Capture Energy and then now grabs the Bidoof off of the Quick Ball. So 1 in the hand, thinning 1 out of the deck as well, though.
Yeah, already preparing for that Industrious Incisors to draw a few more cards, to find the resources necessary to continue the onslaught with this Espeon VMAX. We'll see if this is a better idea from what we saw in game number 1, where the threat of Max Mindstorm's damage really puts a chill on Hale's ability to attach energy to his Pokemon, because the Rolling Iron, you have to be set up and swing in to continuously keep up that damage reduction.
So 160 damage from the Max Mindstorm. You can just see how tough it is to play against this Goodra deck. The Rolling Iron damage reduction, so annoying. And with double turbo energy coming down, that must mean Hyper Potion is coming not too far behind.
Hyper Potion, a classic combo at this point, being paid for with the double turbo energy and healing 120 damage. A big charm now attached. Goodra VStar even harder to take down.
Yes, the longer that this Goodra sticks around, the more difficult it becomes for James.
Should be 180.
The Path to the Peak in play,
oh,
actually
that's right,
turning
the path
off that Gardevoir.
turns off the Gardevoir. The math is mathing, Chip.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, James' own path. Oh, and that is going to be it. James cannot win, concedes the game, and Hale Obernolte wins the Salt Lake City Regional Championships.
Goodra VStar, too big, too bulky, too slippery for these decks that don't have the massive damage output needed to get through the Rolling Iron.